Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Hello, our bucket list. Good to see you. Lots of love. Thanks for coming in. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing, nonprofit, educational, or personal use. Tips and balance in favor. Fair use. I want to thank my friend, and I call her my sister here, Jackie, for wanting me to do this story on the Soham murders. This is Ian Huntley, who murdered Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Maxine Carr was his girlfriend who lied to the police, tried to cover up, said she was with him, such and such. But we'll go over all these lies and deceits. So please like, subscribe, and share. Also, if you see the code on the top over there, that means it is a QR code, and that's a way to go get a copy of my book. Thank you so much. So let's, without further ado, and if you're at Facebook or Book of Faces, please say hello too. So let's go ahead. We're going to go, before we go to Ian Huntley's biography, let's go ahead and say some of the mistakes made by Maxine Carr. And I want to reiterate that even though she lied, she got a slap on the wrist, and she was with him. And I think that instead of giving 3 years, because you are aiding and abetting a murderer, I think you should be charged as an accomplice to murder when you're aid and abet and try to cover up for somebody. You should be charged equally since you are trying to cover. And this it gets sick and twisted. And y'all understand what I mean by this in a few minutes because, oh man, this lady knew the girl, okay? This lady knew the girl, and that girl liked her and even given her a card and her appreciation. The murdered girl, one of the murdered. Okay, so the mistake made by Maxine Carr that showed she knew Ian Huntley had killed Soham schoolgirls. Ian Huntley has since been jailed for life and told he must serve 40 years behind bars for committing the heinous crime. This is the Chronicle Live. So I'd like to give credit where credit is due. This was May the 23rd, 2019, put out there. She made a crucial error in a TV interview. So I don't know if it's going to go there. The desperate search for best friends, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, pulled at the heartstrings of the nation. The innocent girls were just 10 years old when they were murdered by school caretaker Ian Huntley in the summer of 2002. The system really was not ever protecting kids when you find out more when we go over Ian's biography. Huntley has since been jailed for life and told he must serve 40 years behind bars for committing the heinous crime. Girlfriend Maxine Carr, a teaching assistant at the two girls' school, was also in prison after being found guilty of perverting the cause of justice. Carr was jailed for 3.5 years for her sinister involvement, made all the more heartbreaking after little Holly gave her a card on the last day of term to thank her for being a good teaching assistant. She knew that her boyfriend killed this precious girl when a precious girl had gave her a card thanking her for being a good teaching assistant. But she wasn't really a good person after all, was she? So in the Mirror reports, it was as Carr bragged about this on television in an interview during the desperate search for Holly and Jessica that she made a fatal error that would eventually lead to her arrest. Speaking to a TV reporter, Carr says no one believes they would ever run away. They were very close to their families. This is something that I will keep for the rest of my life. Levi Belfield, too sick to do prison job after ITV manhunt drama left him distressed. It's what Holly gave me on the last day of term, and there's a poem written inside saying, to a special teaching assistant, and that we will miss her and we will see her in the future. Wow. So she already knew she was dead because we will in the past term. See what I mean? That was the kind of girl she was. She was just really lovely. So when she was supposedly a missing kid, and then she goes like she was, almost instantly, Carr's mistake was spotted. She had referred to Holly in the past tense with the word were. Carr's boyfriend, Huntley, also made 5 key mistakes that finally saw him face justice. There is a sorry piece of crap, and I call her a sorry piece of crap. None of them should ever be around kids. I promise you that. None of them should have ever. Number one, the press. At first, the school caretaker had been reluctant to talk to the media, but soon started enjoying his moment in the timelight. But that was to backfire on him, as people in his old hometown of Grimsby recognized him as a man who had been linked to previous sex attacks on women. And we got to, the more you see, it's not just women that he did these attacks on. He preferred young girls. The phone, Jessica's mobile phone, had been switched off at 6:46 p.m. on the day the girls disappeared. But when it sent its goodbye signal to the phone mast, it showed it was in the vicinity of Huntley's house when it was powered down. The lies. When Maxine Carr was first interviewed by police, she insisted she had been with Huntley all of the day the girls disappeared. But mobile phone records proved she was 100 miles away in Grimsby on the day. The shirts. Huntley also rang alarm bells with Special Constable Sharon Gilbert when he asked her how long DNA lasted for. She says, I just thought it was strange, very strange. It is not what a normal member of the public says to someone who is sat in uniform in front of them. Police believe that within hours of that conversation, Huntley returned to the woodland where he had dumped the bodies to cut off the girls' distinctive Manchester United shirts and tried to burn them in a bid to destroy any DNA evidence. Here are the girls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. He then dumped the shirts in a bin at the school where he worked, covered them with another bag of rubbish. He figured that police had already searched the school once and would not go back. but he was mistaken. DCS Stevenson says, I shall never forget that moment that I received the phone call that they had found the girls' clothes and they were in such condition that there really was no hope of finding the girls alive. Quite clearly, it was a watershed moment. The car. Huntley's final mistake was after he dumped the girls' bodies in the woodland, he got new tires put on his old Ford Fiesta. This aroused the suspicion again, and when police tested chalk found underneath Huntley's car, it was an exact match for chalk on the lane leading to where the bodies were found. Huntley was charged with the girls' murders and, after initially denying everything, changed his story and told the court that the girls died accidentally and had pled guilty to manslaughter. But the jury found him guilty of murder and he was sentenced to serve a minimum of 40 years in prison. DCS Stevenson says, has a perfect crime ever been committed? I doubt it. I think we would have got him convicted. I think we would have stood a good chance. But without those shirts, it would have been a much weaker case. So let's stop sharing right there. Let's go back to trying to click on this to get rid of that one. Sometimes it fuzzes. Hi there, Chris Miller. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. So now let's go up here and share this on his biography. And note, he is deceased now. So no need to be upset. No time, no ceases. Okay. So now let's go over here to his biography. And I was reading up on it earlier, so that's why I'm having to scroll back down right here. So, who was Ian Huntley? Or Ian, whichever way you want to pronounce it, right? Ian Huntley, a caretaker for a British college, was convicted of the 2002 Soham murders in England and later died in a prison attack. So, looky there, y'all. He was murdered in a prison attack. There's going to be some people that will go like this and come back at you. You mess with kids, they'll be back after you. So it says 1974 to 2026. Who was Ian Huntley? Gotta not answer that. British child killer Ian Huntley was arrested for and convicted of the 2002. Hey, I'm doing a live right now.
Hey, all right, I'll call you back. I just missed your call.
Okay. All right, bye-bye. British child killer Ian Huntley was arrested for and convicted of the 2002 Soham murders in England. His victims were two 10-year-old girls named Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Their disappearance August, let me put it bigger so I can. Okay, their disappearance in August set off a highly publicized search. Huntley was arrested weeks later, convicted of both murders in late 2003, and sentenced to 40 years in prison. He narrowly avoided a life sentence due to the 2003 Criminal Justice Act, which took effect one day after his conviction. Huntley died during his incarceration on March 7, 2026, following an attack by an inmate. He was born in Grimsby, England. He is married to Claire Evans, 1995 to 1999. He has a child, Samantha. You'll see the story behind that in a few, right? Ian Kevin Huntley was born January 31st, 1974, into a working-class home in Grimsby, England, in northeast Lincolnshire. He is the first son of Kevin and Linda Huntley. An asthma sufferer, Huntley had a turbulent time at school, as he was often the target of school bullying. The problem continued to escalate until, at age 13, he was forced to change schools. He left school in 1990 and declined to continue his studies, despite reasonable grades, choosing instead to good job, to get a job. So I want to tell y'all, please don't feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for anybody that's bullied, but in this equation, he had a choice and he stalked out these girls and murdered them. And that's even worse than bullying. Ex wife, daughter, and relationships. In the years after he left school, Huntley already seemed to have developed an interest in young girls. And he was seen out with 13-year-old girls when he was 18. In December 94, Huntley, then 20, met 18-year-old Claire Evans. The two embarked on a whirlwind romance and married within weeks. The marriage was short-lived, however, and Evans left in within days of their wedding, choosing to move in with Huntley's younger brother Wayne instead. An enraged Huntley refused to grant his wife a divorce until 1999, preventing her from wedding his brother. Following the collapse of his marriage, Huntley became more nomadic, moving from one rented flat to the next and changing jobs frequently. He had a succession of relationships, one of which was with a 15-year-old girl with whom he fathered a daughter in 1998. That was Samantha. In 2016, his daughter Samantha Bryan revealed that she had accidentally discovered the identity of her biological father while working on a school project when she was 14. A subsequent inquiry revealed that between 95 and 2001, Huntley had sexual contact with 11 underage girls, ranging between 11 and 17 years old. On January the 7th, 1998, Huntley appeared in court after being charged with robbing a neighbor's house. I kid you not, this is going to make y'all mad right here. That May, he was charged with the rape of an 18-year-old girl in Grimsby. Neither case proceeded to court due to lack of evidence. So guess what? He got away from it, right? But the rape allegation tainted him substantially. In February 99, he met 22-year-old Maxine Carr at a nightclub, and they moved in together after 4 weeks. The relationship endured despite some turbulent arguments, and in 2001, they moved to the town of Littleport, where Huntley took a job at a local center as a manager of a team of caretakers. In September 2001, he applied for the post of caretaker at Soham Village College. Despite his history of sexual contact with minors, he was awarded the position in November. See how the system failed everybody, failed all these kids. I think when in situations like this, the schools need to be prosecuted as well when they don't go into and check out things and put children in danger. The school's principal later admitted he didn't check Huntley's references. Carr was employed as a teaching assistant at the local primary school. Soham murders and arrests. These are the two sweet girls right here, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. In the early evening of August the 4th, 2002, two 10-year-old girls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, were on their way to buy sweets when they walked past Huntley's rented house near Soham Village College. Huntley saw them and asked them in, claiming that Carr, who the girls knew through her work at their school, was also at home. Carr, in fact, was away visiting relatives at the time, and within a short time of Wells and Jessica having entered the house, Huntley had murdered both of them. Huntley used his car to transport their bodies some 20 miles away, where he dumped them in a ditch and set them alight. So he set them on fire in a bid to destroy the forensic evidence. Later that evening, Chapman and Wells were reported missing, and a police search began at around midnight. Over the next 2 weeks, the search escalated to become one of the most widespread and publicized in British history. Several witnesses came forward, including Huntley, who claimed to have seen the girls shortly before they disappeared. His home was searched routinely in order to eliminate him as a suspect. Huntley also granted television interviews to the press, and his unusual interest, together with his emotional involvement, made investigators suspicious. Their hunch led to a wider search that revealed the half-burned remains of Wells and Chapman shirts in a storage building at Soham College where Huntley was employed. Following the find, police arrested Huntley and Carr on a suspicion of murder on August 17th. Later that day, 13 days after the girls had disappeared, a game warden discovered the girls' bodies near RAF Lakenheath, an airbase in Suffolk that was close to Huntley's father's home. Subsequent autopsy reports on the girls listed their probable cause of death as asphyxiation, but their bodies were too badly decomposed to establish whether they had been sexually assaulted. And you know how I like girls, so young girls, so I can imagine they were. Trial and sentencing. Okay, this is the families of the two girls right here, right? The parents of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, Kevin and Nicola Wells, and Les and Sharon Chapman arrived for the first day of Ian Huntley's murder trial in November 2003. Despite Huntley's attempts to destroy forensic evidence, extensive hair and fiber residue remained, linking Huntley to the girls. Huntley was formally charged with the girls' murders and sectioned under the Mental Health Act at Rampton Hospital, pending a hearing to establish if he was fit for trial. Carr was arrested for assisting an offender, as well as conspiring to obstruct the course of justice, as she had initially provided Huntley with a false alibi for the time of their disappearance. The trials of Huntley and Carr opened to worldwide media interest in London on November the 5th, 2003. Huntley was faced with two murder charges, while Carr was charged with perverting the course of justice, and assisting an offender. So what catch you, and instead of just assisting an offender, but how about, being having the same charge, since you were assisting the offender and it ended up being murder and you're helping cover for the murder, I think you should be charged as an accomplice to the murder. The prosecution entered exhaustive evidence linking Huntley to the girls, though he previously denied having any knowledge of their murders. Then 3 weeks into the trial, Huntley suddenly changed his story. He admitted the girls had died in his house, but he claimed that both deaths were accidental. The defense called Huntley as a first witness, and he described how he had accidentally knocked Wells into the bath while helping her control a nosebleed and had accidentally suffocated Chapman when she started to scream, and he tried to silence her. On cross-examination, the prosecution described his latest version as rubbish. What do y'all think about this? I'm fixing to log into this live and see if anybody's saying anything. So, Carr's testimony began 3 days later. She claimed she had no control over the events of the day of the murder and that she known of Huntley's murderous intent. Oh, had she known of it, she would never have lied to protect him. But you knew that he had done it, so you're lying to protect him. But if you had known previously of his intent, you wouldn't have protected him? Excuse me? What say you there? Following her testimony, the prosecution presented their closing statements, claiming that both Carr and Huntley were convincing liars and that Huntley's motive for murdering the girls was sexual, though physical evidence of assault was impossible to prove. After 5 days of deliberation, the jury rejected Huntley's claims that the girls had died accidentally and on December the 17th, 2003, returned a majority verdict of guilty on both charges. Huntley was sentenced to life imprisonment, but there was a delay on the setting of the sentence, as the 2003 Criminal Justice Act took effect one day after his conviction. At a hearing on September 29, 2005, a judge ruled that the Soham murders didn't meet the criteria for a whole life sentence that under the new act was reserved for sexual, sadistic, or abduction cases. Excuse me, is it not a form of abduction? He got them to go in the house and he did not let them go. So it said it did not warrant a whole life sentence when they murder? Do what? I mean, some people do death penalties for you murdering, This is crazy. Absolutely diabolically crazy. Instead, the judge imposed a 40-year prison sentence, which offers Huntley very little hope for release. Huntley didn't actually attend his sentencing hearing because 15 days earlier, he had been attacked by another inmate at Belmarsh Prison and scalded with boiling water. I'm sorry, right now, I am not going to feel sorry for him being scalded with boiling water. Excuse me, I'm not going to. Carr was cleared of assisting an offender but found guilty of perverting the course of justice and jailed for 3.5 years. She was freed under police protection in May 2004, and she had already spent 16 months on remand pending the trial. Carr was given a new identity on her release. Do what? I'd like to know who her real person is because if she's got a history of being in toxic relationships and whatnot, okay? So she was granted an indefinite order protecting her new identity by the High Court on the basis that her life would be in danger were her new identity to be revealed. You might be helping some other pedophile and you are being protected? A number of investigations launched by then Home Secretary David Blunkett looked into the failures of the police and other social and vetting agencies that should have stopped Huntley sooner. These investigations identified system-wide communication and intelligence sharing errors, which led to the suspicion and early retirement of the chief of Humberside Police. Confession and life in prison. This is the vigil, the two girls with that. Candles are lit in remembrance of Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells inside St. Andrew's Church on August 18, 2002 in Soham, Cambridgeshire. Since being jailed, Huntley has reportedly admitted to his father that he lied when given evidence at his trial, saying that he killed Chapman to prevent her from calling for help on her mobile phone, rather than suffocating her accidentally, as he claimed in court. On July the 23rd, 2004, Carr's mother, Shirley Capp, was sentenced to 6 months in jail for intimidating a witness during the trial. Wow! Even Carr's mother, even the ladies, she was said, wow. Shirley Capp. Wow. Capp's neighbor, Marion Westerman, had told police that she had seen a crying Carr and Huntley looking in the boot of a car outside Carr's mother's house, shortly after Wells and Chapman had gone missing. Capp's threats to Westerman had nearly resulted in her retracting her statement at the time instead of testifying in court. Wow. Like I said, you want to go like this and protect a person that killed a kid, you need more than just a couple months or a couple years. You need to be charged as accomplice to murder. You too, Mrs. Capp. On September the 5th, 2006, Huntley was rushed to the hospital after being found unconscious in his prison cell. He was taken to Pinefield's Hospital in Wakefield to receive treatment for suspected drug overdose and was returned to prison the next day. Following the incidents, the Home Office released a statement to the media. Huntley continues to be managed according to prison service policy on the prevention of suicide and self harm. In particular, he'll be subject to assessment, care and custody, and teamwork procedures through which his risk will be continually assessed. The prison service works to minimize the risk of any prisoner taking their own life, but it cannot eliminate that risk entirely. Huntley has been considered a suicide risk in 2003 after he took 29 antidepressant pills that he had hidden away in a box of tea bags. In 2007, Huntley confessed to the 1997 sexual assault of an 11-year-old girl. A year after, in 2008, he was relocated to HMP Franklin. Now, here is his death. Huntley was reportedly attacked multiple times by fellow inmates during his incarceration, including an incident of having his throat slashed by Damien Folks in 2010. In February 2026, British media reported that an inmate had attacked Huntley again, this time repeatedly hitting him in the head with a metal bar. The Sun reported that Huntley underwent surgery for a broken jaw and was placed on life support. Days later, on March 7th, a Durham constabulary spokesman, I don't know how to pronounce that, constabulary spokesperson confirmed that Huntley died in a hospital from his injuries. Authorities have not confirmed the identity of Huntley's attacker, but according to the Manchester Evening News, it is believed to be Anthony Russell. The convicted killer previously pled guilty to the October 2020 murders of 3 women and was sentenced to a whole life order, the maximum penalty under British law. Following Huntley's death, a Ministry of Justice spokesperson said, "The murders of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman remains one of the most shocking and devastating cases in our nation's history, and our thoughts are with the families." Huntley's daughter, Samantha Bryan, said she felt relieved and over the moon after learning of his death and suggested his remains should be flushed down the toilet. You go, girl. You go, girl. Yes, I love it. So I was kind of expecting this call, but at the same time, it is a shock to be told your biological father is dead. He's nothing to me apart from biology, she said, according to The Independent. Okay. So let's get past this over here. So, get back over here to StreamYard. Good to see you, Jackie. Thanks for coming in. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Hi, David. Good to see you. Appreciate you. So let's get back to. I got more on this story at Wikipedia because the fact is there's some things and there's some movies on Netflix and such where you can look at this case even more so. So let's get in here. Thank you, Jackie, for getting me to do this story and bringing this to awareness. Okay. So here's the Soham murders, where a double child murder committed in Soham, Cambridgeshire, England on August 4th, 2002. The victims were 2 10-year-old girls, Holly Marie Wells and Jessica Amy Chapman, who were lured into the home of a local resident and school caretaker, Ian Huntley, who murdered them most likely by asphyxiation and disposed of their bodies in an irrigation ditch close to RAF Lincoln Heath and Suffolk. The bodies were discovered on August 17, 2002. Huntley was convicted of the murder of both girls on December 17th and sentenced to 2 terms of life imprisonment. Don't say 2, that's 40 years, but not really life. I get so tired and people say life sentence when, won't they just say 20 years, right? Because life imprisonment to me is life, until you die, okay? I'm so sick and tired of them saying 2 terms of life or a term of life when it's just like 20 years. So you need to be factual more and calling it for what it is. A duck's a duck, a goose is a goose, okay? His girlfriend, Maxine Ann Carr, the girl's teaching assistant, had knowingly provided Huntley with a false alibi. She received a 3.5 year prison sentence for conspiring. Okay, so let's go down here. There's more to this story that's not said in the prior, okay? At 11:45 a.m. on Sunday, August the 4th, 2002, Jessica Chapman left her home on Brook Street, Soham, for a barbecue at the home of her best friend, Holly Wells, in nearby Red House Gardens. Prior to leaving her home, Chapman told her parents she was going to give her friend a necklace engraved with the letter H that she had purchased for her on a recent family home holiday in Monarca. I hope I pronounced that right. The two girls, together with their friend Natalie Parr, spent about half an hour playing computer games and listening to music before Parr returned home. By 3:15 p.m., both had changed into distinctive replica Manchester United football shirts, one belonging to Wells and the other to her older brother Oliver. Can you imagine the impact that it's just hitting Oliver, her brother? At 5:04 p.m., Wells' mother photographed the pair before they ate dinner with the other guests. Then they returned upstairs where they browsed the internet and sent several emails between 5:11 p.m. and 5:32 p.m. At approximately 6:05 p.m., the girls left the Wells residence without informing anyone, intending to buy sweets from the vending machine at the Ross Pierce Sports Center. While walking back to 4 Red House Gardens, they passed the college close home of Ian Huntley, the senior caretaker at the local secondary school. Huntley lured them inside by claiming that his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, their teaching assistant at St. Andrew's Primary School, was in the house, although she was in fact visiting her mother in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. Precise sequence of events after the girls entered Five College Close remains unknown. Investigators believe that certain elements of Huntley's subsequent public statements to the media and later claims made during the trial testimony, including assertions that he had been washing his dog when the girls passed at around 6:30 p.m. and that one had suffered a mild nosebleed, may contain fragments of truth. The cause of death for both girls was later determined to be asphyxiation. Chapman's Nokia 6110 mobile phone was switched off at 6:46 p.m. At 8 p.m., Nicola Wells went to her daughter's bedroom to invite the girls to say goodbye to her guests, only to discover that both were missing. She and her husband, Kevin, searched the house and surrounding streets. Minutes after her daughter's 8:30 p.m. curfew had passed, Nicola Wells telephoned the Chapman household, learning that Leslie and Sharon Chapman were themselves concerned that their youngest daughter had not returned home. Following frantic efforts by both families to locate the girls, Wells and Chapman were reported missing by the parents at 9:55 p.m. Police immediately launched an intensive search for the missing children. More than 400 officers were assigned full-time to search for the girls. These officers conducted extensive house-to-house inquiries across Soham. Their efforts to search local terrain were supported by hundreds of local volunteers and later by the United States Air Force personnel stationed at nearby air bases. To support their public appeals for information, Cambridgeshire Police released the photograph Nicola Wells had taken of the children less than 2 hours before their disappearance, depicting both girls wearing their Manchester United replica football shirts. A physical description of each girl was also released to the media, stating that both were white, 4 foot 6 inches tall, and slim. Chapman was described as tanned with shoulder-length brown hair. Wells was described as fair with blonde hair. The parents of both girls said their daughters had been wary of talking to strangers, having been warned from early childhood not to trust people they did not know. This was supported by the head teacher of St. Andrew's Primary School, who told reporters, The possible danger from strangers is something we have impressed upon the children from an early age. Suspecting the children had been kidnapped, investigators questioned every registered sex offender in Cambridgeshire and neighbouring Lincolnshire. More than 260 registered sex offenders across the UK, including 15 high risk pedophiles, were also questioned. All were eliminated from the investigation. Police also examined the possibility that the girls had arranged to meet someone they had contacted by an internet chat room, but this soon was ruled out. The community held a candlelight vigil on August the 7th. Following day, CCTV footage of the girls, recorded minutes before their disappearance, was released to the public. This footage depicted them arriving at the local sports center at 6:28 p.m. A televised reconstruction of the children's last known movements was broadcast nationally on August the 10th, and both sets of parents granted an interview with the presenter, Colin Baker, on TV's Current Affairs program Tonight, which was broadcast on 12th of August. Other family members and friends of both girls also appealed via the media for the safe return of the children. These appeals for information on the whereabouts of Wells and Chapman produced more than 2,000 phone calls and tips from the public, with all information obtained entered into the investigation's Holmes 2 database. Shortly after the children's disappearance, Staffordshire police contacted the investigating officers to report their suspicions the girls could have been abducted by the same man responsible for an abduction in their jurisdiction the previous year, in which a 6-year-old girl had survived an indecent assault by an abductor who was still at large. The offender drove a green Ford Mondeo with number plates which had earlier been stolen in Peterborough. The person responsible for this abduction and assault was also believed to have followed a 12-year-old girl in the same area, although in this instance his car had been fitted with number plates which had been stolen in Nottinghamshire. The same vehicle had recently been sighted in Glatton, Cambridgeshire. This information was later included in a televised appeal about the children's disappearance on the BBC's Crime Watch, but the lead did not result in any significant developments. Several members of the public reported having seen the children in the early days of the investigation. Mark Tuck informed investigators that he had also driven past the girls on Sand Street in Soham Town Centre at approximately 6:30 p.m. on August the 4th. His attention had been drawn to their Manchester United replica church, prompting him to remark to his wife Lucy, "Look, there's two little Beckhams over there." A young woman named Karen remarked to Karen Greenwood reported seeing girls walking arm in arm along College Road approximately 2 minutes later. Another woman living in nearby Little Thetford claimed to have seen two girls whose appearance and clothing matched those of Wells and Chapman walking past her home the following morning. Police also received statements regarding a suspicious white van seen in Soham in the evening of the children's disappearance. Investigators located and seized this vehicle from a caravan park in Whitworth on August the 7th, but the lead proved fruitless. On August the 12th, police launched an appeal to trace a driver of a four-door dark green saloon car, possibly a Peugeot 405 or Vauxhall Vectra. A taxi driver stated he had seen the driver thrashing his arms as he struggled with two young girls inside the vehicle while traveling on the A142 south of Soham towards Newmarket around the time the girls were last seen. The vehicle was last observed turned into the Stedlands Park housing estate. And I want to say, I'm glad that he reported that, even though it was not the girls. But for the fact, if he didn't report it, what if it had been the girls? So it was good for him to report anything but glad. But it's sad to say that they were already gone. The following evening, a jogger alerted police to two mounds of recently disturbed earth he had seen at Warren Hill, just outside Newmarket, which he speculated might have been the burial sites of the two girls. An overnight examination revealed them to be badger sets. One person who claimed to have spoken with the girls immediately before their disappearance was 28-year-old Huntley, who informed investigators on August the 5th he had a brief conversation with both girls on his doorstep the previous afternoon. According to Huntley, Wells and Chapman, both happy as Larry, had previously inquired as to whether his partner Carr had been successful in a recent application for a full-time teaching assistant position at their school. When he had replied Carr had not attained the role, one of the girls had said, "Tell her we're sorry," before they both walked along College Street towards a bridge leading to Clay Street. See, he wanted to insert himself into the story saying this. See, police were suspicious of Huntley's account. A single police officer searched his house on August the 5th. No incriminating evidence was found. But the officer noticed items of clothing on the washing line despite the fact it had been raining. In reference to the evident extensive cleaning of the house interior, Huntley said, "It's used the dining room. We had a flood." The officer was unconvinced by Huntley's explanation and suspicious of his agitated demeanor. Huntley remained a strong suspect. On August the 6th, Huntley drove from Soham to Grinsby to pick up Carr. Shortly before the two returned to college close, a neighbor Carr's mother, Marion Clift, saw the couple standing at the rear of their vehicle with the boot open. According to Clift, a pale, shaken Huntley stared into the boot for several moments while Carr stood beside him, her head bowed, weeping. When Huntley became aware of Clift's presence, he abruptly closed the boot. Discoveries at about 12:30 p.m. on August the 17th. A 48-year-old gamekeeper, Keith Pryor, discovered the bodies of both girls lying side by side in a 5-foot deep irrigation ditch close to a pheasant pen near the perimeter pits of RAF Lakenheath and Suffolk, more than 10 miles east of Soham. Pryor had noticed what he later described as an unusual and unpleasant smell in the area several days earlier. When returning with two friends on August the 17th, he decided to investigate its cause. Walking through an overgrown verge about 600 yards from a partially tarmacked road, Pryor and one of his companions, Adrian Lawrence, discovered the children's bodies. Lawrence turned to his girlfriend, Helen Sawyer, and shouted, "Don't come any closer, Helen! Get back in the van!" He immediately reported the discoveries to the police. The girls have been missing for 13 days when their bodies were found, and their charred remains were in an advanced state of decomposition. No clear footprints were discovered at the crime scene. Investigators quickly concluded who the two victims most likely were, and they had not died at the location where the bodies were discovered. Numerous hairs later determined to belong to Chapman were discovered on a tree branch close to the location of the body. The following day, Cambridgeshire Deputy Chief Constable Keith Hodder issued a press statement confirming the discovery of the children's bodies. He added that both families had been informed and that although positive formal identification would have taken several days, investigators were certain as they possibly could be the bodies were those of Wells and Chapman. Identification. On August 21st, both bodies were identified via DNA testing. 9 days later, a public memorial service was held at Ely Cathedral for the girls. About 2,000 people attended, including the girls' classmates, teachers, and the 6 family liaison officers who had provided 24-hour support for both families. The Reverend Tim Alban Jones officiated at the service, saying, "Would not the best and most lasting memorial to these two lovely young girls be a change for the better in how we behave towards each other? Today's service is a small milestone in our shared journey of grief and sorrow. It is our hope that we may perhaps draw a line under one phase of our grieving and begin to look forward." An online book of condolence attracted more than 31,000 messages of grief and sympathy. And on August the 24th, football clubs across Britain held a minute's silence before games. The inquest into the children's deaths were held at Shrine Hall, Cambridge, on August the 23rd, 2002. Coroner David Moore stated that the bodies of both girls were partially skeletonized and that no precise cause of death could be determined for either of them. He concluded that the most likely cause of death for both girls had been asphyxiation. Morse added that the girls had almost certainly not died at the location where the bodies had been found, and that both bodies had been placed there within 24 hours of their deaths. These conclusions were supported by an analysis of the nettle shoots at the scene, which enabled forensic oncologist, paleontologist Patricia Wiltshire to estimate that the bodies had been deposited at this location almost 2 weeks earlier. This is where Ely Cathedral is to the right, this picture right here. The funeral services for Wells and Chapman were held on consecutive days in September 2002. Both services took place at St. Andrew's Parish Church and were officiated by Tim Alban Jones. The girls were buried in adjacent graves in Soham's Fordham Road Cemetery, following ceremonies attended only by family members and close friends. At the request of both families, the media refrained from reporting on either service. Thank you all for respecting their privacy. Police investigation. In the weeks following the disappearance, Huntley reluctantly granted several television interviews to media outlets such as Sky News and regional BBC News program BBC Look East, speaking of the general shock in the local community and his dismay at being the last person to see the children alive. What an actor he was? It is dismay that him being the last person to see the children alive. By the second week of the children's disappearance, I guess they didn't even realize that he was literally the last person to see the children alive because he was a murderer, right? Huntley had become an unofficial spokesman for the community of Soham. His explanation for this was that he wanted to convey to the media the frustration and despair the community was feeling. In one interview with Sky News correspondent Jeremy Thompson during the second week of the search, he claimed to be holding on to a glimmer of hope. The children will be found safe and well, and that he had last seen the girls walking in the direction of a local library. Carr was also interviewed by the press during the second week of the search for the children. In this live interview, Carr corroborated Huntley's claims to have conversed with the children on their doorstep as she had been bathing before both girls had walked away from the doorstep, adding, "Only wish we had asked them where they were going. If only we knew then what we know now, then we would have stopped them or done something about it. Y'all are the reason behind it, excuse me." Discussing the personalities of the girls, Carr described Wells as being the more feminine of the two, adding that Chapman was more of a tomboy. Y'all remember who Carr is? Carr is actually the girlfriend, right? Of the murderer. And that on one occasion, she had jokingly remarked to Chapman how, unlike many of her friends, she seldom wore a skirt. To this question, Carr stated that the child had expressed her desire to be a bridesmaid at her own future wedding, and Chapman had said she would willingly wear a dress for such an occasion. Wow. She was wanting to be a bridesmaid for Carr. I can't believe it. Look how sick and twisted this story is. Carr also displayed a thank you card to this reporter, which had recently been given to her by Wells on the last day of the school year. Referring to Wells in the past tense, Carr stated she was just lovely, really lovely, before making a direct appeal to the children. Just get on the phone, just come home, or if somebody's got them, just let them go. By the second week of the children's disappearance, Huntley had begun to lose weight and was displaying visible symptoms of insomnia. To one officer, he said, "You think I've done it? I was the last person to see them before beginning to weep." His erratic behavior and apparent distress led him to being prescribed antidepressants on 13th of August. Suspicions having participated in the search for the children, Huntley regularly asked police officers questions such as how their investigation was progressing and how long DNA evidence could survive before deteriorating. One of these officers observed three vertical scratches on Huntley's left jaw, each measuring approximately 3 centimeters, which he claimed had been recently inflicted by the dog. Wow, more proof right there, huh? On August the 16th, 12 days after the children's disappearance, Huntley and Carr were first questioned by police. Both were questioned for approximately 7 hours. Each gave witness statements before being placed in a safe house in the village of Histon. By this date, police had received information from several Grimsby residents who had recognized Huntley in the television interviews he had given and had recalled he had been accused of rape several years earlier. Others said that, contrary to the televised claims, Carr had been socializing in Grimsby Town Center on the night of the girl's disappearance and was not at home in Soham, as she had claimed to the media. The same evening, police conducted a thorough search of both 5 College Close and the grounds of Soham Village College, where Huntley worked as a senior caretaker, as the couple remained under police watch at separate locations outside Soham. Each room of Huntley's home had evidently been recently meticulously cleaned, with what was later described as being a lemony cleaning fluid. But the search of the home revealed many items of major importance to the investigation. The evidence of artifacts were not made public at the time, but the items recovered from the school grounds included items of clothing the girls had been wearing when last seen. Their charred and cut Manchester United shirts were recovered from a bin in a hangar at Huntley's place of work. Fibers recovered from these garments were a precise match to samples retrieved from Huntley's body and clothing, as well as 5 college clothes. His fingerprints were recovered from the bin. Huntley's Ford Fiesta was also forensically examined on August the 16th. This revealed that the car had also been recently extensively cleaned, but traces of a mixture of brick dust, chalk, and concrete of the same type used to pave the road leading where the girls' bodies were discovered were found around the wheel arches and on and around the pedals. A cover for the rear seat was missing, and the lining of the boot had been recently removed and replaced with an ill-fitting section of household carpet. Having discovered the children's clothes at Soham Village College, police arrested Huntley and Carr on suspicion of abduction and murder at 4:30 a.m. on August the 17th. Investigators had stated on August the 7th they strongly believed the children had been abducted and announced their strong suspicion that both girls had been murdered on this date. During initial questioning, Huntley refused to answer questions and appeared evasive, confused, and emotionally detached, occasionally drooling during police attempts to question him in an effort to feign mental illness. This left police with no option but to refer Huntley to a mental hospital to undergo an extensive psychological evaluation. Carr quickly confessed to detectives she had lied about her whereabouts and her partner's actions on August the 4th, explaining that shortly before she had returned to Soham from Grimsby 3 days later, Huntley claimed to be in a phone call to have seen the 2 girls shortly before their disappearance, admitting the thing is, Maxine, they came in our house. According to Carr, Huntley informed her that the children had entered their home so that Wells could staunch her nosebleed. He then claimed to her that Chapman had sat on their bed as she helped Wells control the bleeding from her nose before both girls left their home. Referencing one of the 1998 rapes he had committed, but had earlier claimed to her to have been falsely accused of in this phone call, Huntley then began voicing concerns as to again being falsely accused of involvement on this occasion. claiming that his previous arrests had caused him to suffer a nervous breakdown. Carr therefore later agreed to concoct a false story with her partner to support his version of events. After being informed of the discovery of the children's bodies and the evidence of Huntley's guilt, including his fingerprints being recovered from the bin in which the children's clothes had been found, Carr burst into tears, shouting, "No, he can't have been. He can't have been. He hadn't done it." Despite these revelations, Carr initially remained emotionally attached to Huntley and professed her belief in his innocence to both the police and her family. So here's the formal charges. By August 20th, investigators had established sufficient physical evidence from Huntley's home, vehicle, and Soham Village College to charge him with 2 counts of murder. He was charged with these offenses while detained for observation at Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottinghamshire, and all preliminary hearings against him were postponed until the conclusion of his mental health assessment. Carr was also charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice on this date. She was further charged with 2 counts of assisting an offender on January the 17th, 2003. While held on remand at Holloway Prison, Carr regularly inquired as to Huntley's welfare and wrote several letters in which she professed her continued love for him. Carr severed contact with Huntley in December 2002. Pre-trial assessments determined Huntley's state of mental health. He was detained under Section 48 of the Mental Health Act for almost 2 months at Rampton Secure Hospital. His mental state was assessed by Christopher Clark, a consultant forensic psychiatrist, to determine whether he suffered from any form of mental illness and whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. Clark concluded in October that although psychopathic, Huntley did not suffer from any major mental or psychotic illness. On October the 8th, Huntley was deemed mentally competent to stand trial. Having been declared mentally fit to stand trial, Huntley was faced with a sentence of life imprisonment if a jury could be convinced of his guilt. He was transferred to a segregation unit at Woodhill Prison in Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire. On June the 9th, 2003, he attempted suicide by taking 29 antidepressants, which he had accumulated in his cell. Staff initially feared Huntley might die as a result of his overdose, but he was returned to his prison cell within 48 hours. Huntley was later transferred to London's Belmarsh prison. At a preliminary hearing of the Old Bailey on April 16, 2003, Huntley pled not guilty to the charges of murdering Wells and Chapman and guilty to the charge both stood accused of: conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Clark pled not guilty to the charges of attempting to pervert the course of justice or assistant offender and conspiring to pervert the course of justice. You did inspire to do, you did that to pervert it, so the trial of Huntley for the murders of Wells and Chapman opened at the Old Bailey on November the 5th, 2003. Before Mr. Justice Alan Moses, Huntley was charged with 2 counts of murder, to which he entered a plea of not guilty. Carr was charged with 2 counts of assisting an offender and 1 count of perverting the course of justice. In the opening statement on behalf of the Crown, prosecutor Richard Latham, QC, described the last day of the girls' lives and how, by pure chance, they had happened to pass by Huntley's home at a time when Carr was not present. Latham contended Huntley had deliberately lured them into his home at approximately 6:37 p.m. and that both had been murdered shortly thereafter, with cell site analysis showing Huntley had switched off Chapman's mobile phone either outside his home or within the grounds of Soham Village College after both girls had been murdered. Latham described how mobile phone records and eyewitness accounts placed Carr in Grimsby on the evening in question, showing the statements she had given to police and press had been false. He then outlined the details of how Keith Pryor and his 2 friends had discovered the bodies on August the 17th at a location Huntley had known from his plane spotting hobby and where they were unlikely to be discovered. That gets a little bit more answer there. Unlikely to be discovered. Referencing the likely motive for the girl's murder and the cause of death of each victim, Levin stated that owing to the extensive state of decomposition of the bodies, the coroner has been unable to determine the precise cause of death of either child, or whether they've been sexually assaulted before or after death. Lathan stated neither body showed signs of comprehensive neck injuries, knife wounds, drugging, or poisoning, and that both girls had most likely died of asphyxiation. In reference to Huntley's claims that both girls' death had been accidental, Lathan stated that only one person knows what happened after they entered his home. He stressed that the cause of death was murder, adding, 10-year-old girls don't just drop dead. In reference to Carr's attempts to pervert the course of justice, Lathan stated, as surely as night follows day, the two had conspired to concoct a false alibi to divert suspicion from Huntley, but emphasized to the jury that Carr could be convinced of assisting the offender only if they believed she had known Huntley had murdered the girls, adding that her motive for telling lies to police with reference to the charge of perverting the course of justice was irrelevant. I think that regardless of whether she did believe him or disbelieve him, if you're hampering the investigation and you know the probability or possibility that he did commit murder, I still think that she should still have been charged for the full extent. Over the course of 3 days, Latham outlined the efforts of both defendants to divert suspicion away from Huntley and Huntley's own theories to destroy all physical and circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime. But despite these efforts, investigators had retrieved enough evidence to show the girls had been murdered within his home and within approximately 12 hours of their death, transported in his vehicle to the location where their bodies were discovered on August the 17th. This had included fiber evidence retrieved from Huntley's vehicle, clothes and carpets, which is a precise match to the Manchester United shirts the girls had been wearing at the time of their disappearance. Latham then closed his statement by again bringing the jury's attention to Huntley's claim that both deaths had been accidental, remarking, "We posed this question to two of them." He then speculated Huntley's defense counsel may try to argue that he had been confused, commenting in that case they would have to consider Huntley's behavior over the fortnight between the girls' disappearance and their bodies being found. Testimony relating to the forensic evidence linking Huntley was heard on November 24th. On this date, a forensic scientist, Helen Davy, testified about the biological evidence recovered from the girls' clothing, footwear, and the dishcloth discovered in the hangar of Soham Village College on August 16th. Davy testified she had found minute traces of blood and saliva on these objects, but no positive traces of semen. She explained the reason for the lack of any traces of semen being discovered could have been as a result of the charred and melting condition of the articles she had inspected. The scenes of crime officer also testified that despite Huntley's exhaustive efforts to remove physical evidence of his crime from his home, a forensic examination had revealed several traces of blood spattered about the hallway and main entrance to the master bedroom. On December the 1st, Huntley testified before the court in his defense, responding to the question by his defense counsel, Stephen Coward. What a good name, Coward, huh? You see. Huntley admitted both girls had died in his house, but denied that either death had been intentionally. According to Huntley, he, Wells, and Chapman had entered his bathroom, stem of my nosebleed. Wells had been suffering when the girls had walked by his home. The bathroom was already filled with water as he had been cleaning his dog that afternoon. In the bathroom, he had slipped and accidentally knocked Wells into the bath while helping her staunch her nosebleed. And this unintentional act had caused her to drown as he panicked and froze. He further claimed Chapman had witnessed this accident and began repeating screaming, "You pushed her!" and that he had then accidentally suffocated her while attempting to disciple her screaming, which had preoccupied his attention as opposed to ensuring Wells did not drown. By the time his state of panic had waned, it had been too late to save the lives of either of the children, and that his first coherent memory had been of sitting on his vomit-stained landing close to the Chapman's body. When questioned about this failure to call emergency services and subsequent extensive efforts to destroy evidence and divert suspicion from himself, Huntley insisted he had become preoccupied with whether the police and the public would believe the girl's death had been accidental. He had decided to conceal all evidence of the deaths as opposed to either notifying police or paramedics. Weeping Huntley admitted responsibility for both deaths, but repeated his insistence that both deaths had been accidental. He cheerfully claimed he had not attempted to feign insanity upon his arrest, insisting the trauma of the children's deaths had temporarily erased his memory. Wow. And being in the presence of police had caused his mind to temporarily seize. It was a fear of being arrested, it's a fear of being found out. Carr went to the witness box to testify in her own defense. Responding to questions from her defense counsel, Michael Hubbard, Carr briefly discussed her initial acquaintance with Huntley, their subsequent relationship, and plans to start a family once they both attained financial stability, before Hubbard directed his question toward her return to Soham on August the 6th, and her discovering Huntley had recently washed their bedding, had recently cleaned sections of the house. To these questions, Carr explained that her first impression had been that Huntley had a woman in the house, adding their bedding had been washed shortly before August the 4th. Carr further testified by having noted a crack in the enamel of the bathtub, which had not been there when she had traveled to Grimsby 4 days previously. When questioned about why she had then helped Huntley in extensively cleaning their home in the days after the children's murder, Carr claimed she had done so since she has been also obsessive about tidiness. You're obsessive about relationships. Okay, you were sickening and twisted in the other relationships before this guy, and they had left you because you were sick and twisted, and now you're sick and twisted with this, and so now the police is really protecting you still today from all this other kind of stuff with your prior self. And so if you're out there doing this kind of sick and twisted stuff, guess what? It's gonna be like a clean state, and it's sickening. Question about the efforts she had made to mislead both police and the media to divert suspicion from her partner. Carr emphasized she had lied to police, the media, and anyone who asked, only to protect Huntley, who had repeatedly assured her of his innocence of any wrongdoing in the spirit of being fitted up by police for the girl's disappearance should they discover the 98 rape allegation made against him. She further claimed to have referred to Wells and Chapman using the past tense merely because she had worked with the children in the past. Can I say BS to that? She had known about it. But anyway, when she referred to him as in the past, so she knew about it, okay? And the thing about it is, if you wanted to protect him, thinking that he's innocent, let the judicial system try to clear him then, okay? Let him try to clear if he is innocent. Now, I know that a lot of judicial systems are corrupt, but this one was a little different. Carr said she had tried to persuade Huntley to contact police and be open about his claims to have invited the children into his home for Wells to staunch her nosebleed, but that he had refused to do so, as inviting children into their home had been a violation of the rules imposed by St. Andrew's Primary School. So he was going against the rules right there in itself, too. See that right there? She further explained her focus had therefore been to protect Huntley's job and reputation, added that had she known of Huntley's guilt, she would never have attempted to provide him with a false alibi, stating to her counsel, if for a minute I had known or believed he murdered either one of those girls, I would have been horrified. Concluding his question, Hubbard cautioned the jury not to succumb to the temptation of judging Carr's morality, but to consider her state of mind prior to her arrest and consider whether the lies she has told warranted any criminal liability, said she had done no wrong on the date of the children's murder and had not returned to Soham until August the 6th. Well, maybe if she would have said from the beginning, look, was out of town, I was just this far away, guess what? You would never even have the guilt part upon you because you would have just said, I wasn't there, right? Instead of it's put yourself into the equation, said you were there with him, okay? So you did that to yourself, okay? So on December the 10th, counsel for both prosecution and defense delivered their closing arguments to the jury. Lathan delivered his closing argument on behalf of the prosecution by describing Huntley and Carr as accomplished liars, being before outlining the prosecution's case that both children had to die to satisfy Huntley's selfish self-interest before Huntley, with Carr's support, had embarked on 12 days of cynical deception, with Carr revealing the truth to police only after being informed of the discovery of the children's bodies. Possibly also being informed about knowing that these other people came clean and said she was in this other location, that she lied about it. So she probably knew that too. So she knew that she was going to be, that she had been found out too. Referencing Huntley's likely motive for the murders and his claims at trial that both deaths had been accidental, Nathan stated, we invite you to reject the accounts of both deaths being accidental as desperate lies. The only way out for him, we suggest the whole business in the house was motivated by something sexual, but whatever he initiated with one or the other of both girls plainly went wrong. Thereafter, in this ruthless man's mind, both girls simply had to die. They had to die in his own selfish self-interest. Each was a witness, a potential complaint, and he was quite merciless. In reference to Carr's conscious efforts to deceive the police and media alike, Lathan stated she had the prospect of marriage, a baby, a nice home, and a new start. She preferred to do what she could to make the best of the position she was in, that involved at all costs protecting Ian Huntley. At all costs, going ahead and lying. Following the conclusion of the prosecution's closing argument, Coward delivered his argument on behalf of the defense. He conceded his client was guilty of physical responsibility for the girls' deaths, as Huntley had admitted and therefore deserved punishment, but argued that the prosecution had failed to provide definitive proof that Huntley had intended to murder the children or cause them bodily harm. Coward also contended the prosecution had failed to provide conclusive evidence to support the claim that Huntley's actual motive for the murders had been sexual. Coward concluded his closing arguments by requesting the jury deliver a verdict of manslaughter in relation to both deaths. Upon conclusion of both counsel's closing arguments, Mr. Justice Moses announced the jury would begin their deliberations on December the 12th. So the convictions, the jury deliberated for 4 days before reaching their verdicts against both defendants. On December 17th, we went ahead and said about this earlier. They returned a majority verdict, guilty on 2 counts of murder against Huntley. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of imprisonment to be imposed by the Lord Chief Justice at a later date. And I get so tired, like I said, of been saying life sentences when, okay, when we live a life, it's like from a birth to when we die. So when they're saying it's a life sentence and each one just being 20 years, I don't call that a life sentence, excuse me. The average person don't die at 20-year old, okay? Carr pled guilty to the charge of perverting the court of justice and not guilty to the charge of assisting an offender. The jury accepted her insistence that she had lied to police and media only in order to protect Huntley because prior to their arrest, she had believed his claims of innocence. As such, she was found not guilty of assisting an offender. Carr was sentenced to serve 3.5 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. Minutes after the convictions, the parents of both girls granted an interview to the media discussing Huntley's mindset. Leslie Chapman opined, "I think he was a time bomb waiting to go off, and both our girls were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I hope the next time I see him, it'll be like we saw our daughters, and he'll be in a coffin." Well, guess what? Maybe you were able to go see him in that coffin, right? Sentencing on October 29th, 2005, High Court Judge Mr. Justice Moses announced Huntley must remain in prison until he had served a minimum of 40 years imprisonment, a term which would not allow parole eligibility until 2042, by which time he would be 68 years old. In setting this minimum term of imprisonment, Mr. Justice Moses stated, "The order I make other offers little or no hope of the defendant's eventual release." Huntley avoided eligibility for a whole life term as the passing of the Criminal Justice Act of 2003 had been one day after his conviction, thus taking effect on December 18, 2003, and applying solely to murders committed on or after this date. So, one thing I want to reiterate, okay, they said 40 years. These girls didn't even have 40 years. These girls, you know, they died way too young, 10 years old. They don't have a chance of even being 40 years old, okay? They didn't have a chance of turning 11. And yet this guy's getting an option, was given the option, but he died in jail. He died in prison. But that's still not right. They can't never be married. They can't never have kids. They can't never have a love relationship and such. Anne Huntley was born in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. I'm not going to read all about his life right here. It said that he frequently threw tantrums in order to get his mother's attention. He said how afraid he was of his stern father, And we get on further down here. So get past his marriage and stuff. But okay, I'm going to get down here. Okay, rumors of Huntley's sexual interest in underage girls soon became community gossip, and he was regularly insulted by neighbors and colleagues. As a result, he began rebuffing any offers to socialize with colleagues, fear of being attacked while alone in the company. Well, don't mess with kids. Duh. Simple as that. And you won't be harassed by people when you go to mess with kids, right? In April '98, Huntley was arrested on suspicion of raping an 18-year-old woman. He admitted engaging in sex with the claimant. The claimant and act had been consensual. He was not charged. A month later, Huntley was charged and remanded in custody, making him prison wards for 1 week after 18-year-old Grimsby woman claimed Huntley beat and raped her while she was walking home from a local nightclub. This complainant stated Huntley had threatened to kill her before assaulting her. Huntley admitted to having sex with a woman, but insisted the act had been consensual. The criminal charge was dropped a week later after Crown Prosecution Service, having examined CCTV footage for the nightclub and environs and finding evidence of the two socializing within the nightclub, determined insufficient evidence existed to secure a conviction of the offense. That's pretty scary because, at times when I'm in a nightclub, doesn't mean that I'm going home with nobody. There's other people around. But if somebody's going to do this other thing, that does not mean that you got the right to go ahead and attack me later on and take me home just because we're conversing in there. Um, there's some I would not give the time of day outside the bar. As a result of the complaint, further rumors regarding Huntley's sexual violence also became community gossip, resulting in Huntley being fired from his job and forcing him to move into his mother's home. It's also forbidden from initiating contact with his baby daughter or her mother. In July '98, police were notified that Huntley had sexually assaulted an 11-year-old girl in the town of Cleethorpes. In September '97, having threatened to kill the child if she informed her mother. He was never charged with this offense. Listen to all this. Listen to how many times that they never charged him with it. They never charged with it. But he confessed to the attack in April 2007, was never charged. So he was never put as a sex offender. Do y'all see how the system really screwed these people over? The final criminal allegation against Huntley prior to the Soham murder dates from July 1999. In this instance, a woman was raped in Huntley by the state suspected by police of being a serial sex offender. Was interviewed. Huntley supplied a DNA sample to assist in their inquiries, with Carr providing an alibi to support his claims of innocence. The victim of this assault later said Huntley had not been perpetrator of her assault. The case differs from the others as the victim had not identified or named Huntley as being her assailant. By 2001, Huntley's proven and alleged criminal activities had been reported to Humberside Police on 10 occasions and to the social services on 5 occasions. Huntley's motive for killing the children is unknown. Minutes prior to encountering Wells and Chapman, he is known to have had an argument with Carr, ending in his slamming the phone down. Huntley had allegedly suspected Carr of conducting affairs throughout their relationship, leading his mother and some police officers to suspect that he had killed the two girls in a fit of jealous rage. However, prior to his trial, a criminal profile had resulted in him being described as an eminent criminal psychologist as a latent predatory pedophile who had lured Wells and Chapman into the home in a moment of opportunism. The prosecution contended at Huntley's trial that a likely sexual motive existed for the murders. Testimony from Carr had indicated her suspicions that sexual activity had occurred in their home in her absence, as, although Huntley had assisted throughout their relationship, that Carr performed all domestic chores. She noticed that he had washed the quilts, pillowcases, and sheets of their bed in her absence. Pathological evidence retrieved from the bodies suggested that at least one of the girls had been subjected to sexual assault either before or after her murder. Wow! So why wasn't he charged with that? So y'all saying that there's no evidence and now there's some evidence right here. What y'all think about that? So they had pathological evidence retrieved from the bodies suggests wow. However, this was not disclosed to the jury at Huntley's trial, where Nathaniel Carey, a home office pathologist, explained the bodies were too decomposed and fire damage to determine an exact cause of death or whether either girl had been subjected to a sexual assault. Prosecutors at Huntley's trial contended he had lured the children into his house with a likely sexual motivation, but investigators found no evidence of premeditation in relation to the murders. At the September 2005 hearing, in which the minimum term Huntley should serve before any parole eligibility was decided, Mr. Justice Moses stated there is a likelihood of a sexual motivation. There is no evidence of sexual activity, and it remains no more likely than a likelihood. Make up your mind. They said there's proof, and they said there's not proof. Prior to murdering Wells and Chapman, Huntley had established an extensive record of consensual and non-consensual sexual activity with females, many of whom had been under the age of consent. He would typically use guile or force to achieve his desires. Between 1992 and 2002, he had committed many acts of physical and sexual violence against women and children for which he had been punished. The youngest girl Huntley is known to have raped was 12 years old, with another girl he had attempted to rape being 11. How many others out there, y'all, is there that's not even been reported, right? Following his arrest, several former girlfriends and sexual partners stated that Huntley presented himself as a charming and considerate man in the early stages of a relationship, but become domineering and violent upon having established control. Huntley severely restricted and supervised any contact his partner held with her family or social acquaintances. He would immediately emotionally blackmail his partner if he detected any signs of her developing resistance to his control or indicate a desire to leave him. According to one columnist, the fact that Huntley had remained unpunished for these often blatant and continuous acts had increased his confidence and reinforced his domineering, misogynistic mindset and fueled his recidivism. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. Psychologists determined Huntley had mentally blocked any attempts to accept the reality of enormity of his actions pertaining to his repeated violence against females in order that he might cope with the consequences of his actions. Okay, then we go like this amazing card. We're going to get into who she was, mother, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's go. By the age of 15, Cap weighed more than 10 stone, resulting in her being bullied. So her name before that was, see, Albert Cap was her daddy, okay? Maxine Carr was born Maxine Ann Cap. She is the second of two daughters, okay? So let's get on further down here, okay? Several Cap's colleagues later remarked how they found her in a distant and immature figure with few friends or hobbies. To one colleague, Cap would talk incessantly about her dreams of leaving this employment and embarking on a teaching career. That goes on down. Da, 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 da. Well, Kat resided with her mother in Grimsby. She unofficially adopted the surname Benson. She later legally changed her surname to Carr in an apparent effort to distance herself from her father. Okay, that's how she got the Carr name, right? So let's go on further down. I don't care about their relationship right here. Da, 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 da. Let's go on down. I want to find out more. So there's the aftermath here. An orange petal rose dedicated to the memory of Wells and Chapman was unveiled by representatives of Soham Town Council at the 2003 Chelsea Flower Show. The inspiration for dedicating a flower to the children's memory came from a poem read aloud at the memorial service at Ely Cathedrals on August 30th, 2002, by the father of Wells, titled Soham's Rose. On April the 3rd, 2004, the three-bedroom home and college close in which the murders occurred was demolished. Woohoo! They demolished it, yes! And the site leveled, and with all rubble for the property being discarded at various undisclosed locations. The site where five college closed once stood is now a vacant patch of grass. Okay, let's see. Let's go. Within days of Huntley's sentencing, he reflected to the media on the prospect of spending the remainder of his life behind bars and of his fears for his security, exclaiming, I'm going to rot inside this place. I'll rot in here. I know it. I'll spend the rest of my life in here. I'm going to be inside forever and it'll be torture. Well, what about the torture you did to them girls? What about that? What about all these kind of things being diabolical to these other kids? To these other women and everything. You don't care nothing about nobody but yourself. Well, you didn't care because now you're deceased, so we got to put didn't past her. So on December the 5th, he attempted to kill himself by the overdose of antidepressants. This resulted in his hospitalization and a thorough search of his cell in which a cassette tape was recovered. The cassette tape contains a markedly different account of the murders of Wells and Chapman than to which Huntley had testified at his trial. Wow. I know a lot of people want to hear that tape. And what Huntley had believed would be his posthumous confession, he claims to have confessed to having murdered both girls to Carr prior to their arrest, and his plans to confess to authorities, to which Huntley alleged Carr had slapped his face and informed him to pull himself together, as she did not wish to lose the teaching position she had yearned for all her life. Huntley further alleged Carr had encouraged him to burn both bodies in an attempt to destroy all forensic evidence linking him to the crime. It is believed Huntley had agreed to make this recording for a fellow prisoner who had hoped to later sell the confession to the media after his release in return for being given the antidepressants he had used to attempt suicide. In April 2007, Huntley confessed to having sexually assaulted an 11-year-old girl he had dragged into an orchard in 97. This admission, in which Huntley also confessed to having a sexual interest in children while insisting the murders of Wells and Chapman had not been sexually motivated, was welcomed by the victim of the sexual assault. Following Huntley's admission of guilt, the victim issued a press statement in which she confessed to feeling a massive sense of relief, but concluded the statement with a sentence, "Yet I still feel upset that Huntley was left at large, resulting in the deaths of two innocent children." Okay, so let's go on down to in the years following his conviction and incarceration, Huntley was repeatedly attacked by other inmates. On 14th September 2005, while an inmate at HM Prison, Wakefield, he was scalded with boiling water by convicted spree killer Mark Hobson. The injuries Huntley received in this attack resulted in him being unable to attend a hearing in which the minimum term of imprisonment was decided. Following this attack, Huntley alleged that prison authorities had failed in their duty towards him and launched a claim of $15,000 in compensation. He was reportedly awarded $2,500 legal aid to pursue this claim. Huntley was transferred from Wakefield Prison and HMP Franklin on January 23rd, 2008. 2 years later, on March 21st, 2010, he received non-life-threatening injuries to his neck after his throat was slashed by convicted armed robber Damian Fouts. The injuries Huntley received in this attack required hospital treatment. Huntley again applied for compensation for the injuries he received for this attack, seeking $20,000 in damages. Okay, if you got that kind of stuff for damages, okay, how about some of the people that you had harmed to get sued for damages where they could get that money back away from you, right? Death on February 26, 2026. Huntley received serious head and facial injuries in an assault with an improvised weapon at the hands of another inmate in HMP's Franklin's prison workshop. Tension had risen against Huntley due to his habit of wearing a Manchester United shirt resembling those worn by Chapman and Wells at the time of their murder, which reportedly caused friction between Huntley and other inmates. Oh man, I would be mad about that too. So it's almost like him wearing a badge of honor for killing those two girls, right? Huntley was removed from life support on March 6 and had died the following morning at the age of 52. The sole individual to visit Huntley in hospital prior to his death was his mother. Convicted murderer and rapist Anthony Russell was charged with Huntley's murder on March 10th. The prison's and probation ombudsman has since announced a formal investigation into Huntley's death. Oh, I got to go like that. And shortly after release from prison, Carr and her family contacted a Tyneside-based publishing company with a view toward publishing her autobiography. Mirage Publishing initially agreed to publish Carr's autobiography, but withdrew their offer after a feature on BBC Radio Newscastle prompted scores of complaints from the public. Thank you so much. But we would like to know what her name, right? Immediately after Huntley's conviction, let's go on down. Let me go to here. I want to show y'all down here the different stuff, okay? The media, there's literature. Gerard Niku, Soham, A Story of Our Times, short books. There's the ISBN. Nathan Yates, Beyond Evil, Inside the Twisted Mind of Ian Huntley, John Blake Publishing. Television, the Channel 4 documentary, being Maxine Carr, focuses on the lasting public outrage of Carr's efforts to pervert the course of justice following the Soham murders and how numerous women across the UK have been falsely accused of being Carr. This documentary was first broadcast on December 14, 2007. Soham 10 Years On, produced and directed by Emma McKinney. The 60-minute documentary was first broadcast on July the 30th, 2012. The 90-minute documentary Soham Revisited 15 Years On was first broadcast on April the 25th, 2017. Narrated by Allison Stedman. This documentary features interviews with previous lovers of Huntley. Wow. The Investigation Discovery Channel broadcasts a 60-minute documentary focusing on the Soham murders as part of their Faking It, Tears of a Crime, true crime documentary series. The documentary primarily focuses on the efforts made by Huntley and Carr to deceive police and public alike and was first broadcast on 18th of August 2017. So Channel 5 also commissioned a documentary focusing on the Soham murders. This documentary, titled Five Mistakes That Caught a Killer, was first broadcast on May 23rd, 2019. A further two-part 60-minute documentary commissioned by Channel 6, or Channel 5 Soham, The Murder of Holly and Jessica, was first broadcast on 9 and 10 of March 2022. On Channel 5 first broadcast a 3-episode drama, Maxine, on October 10th, 2022. The series primarily focuses on Carr's role in providing a false alibi for Huntley. It's got like the total population of, I was reading this earlier, so I think that we might benefit from reading some of this. So investigators were able to obtain extensive footage of the children's movements following their departure from the Wells household. The last piece of footage of Wells and Chapman depicts the children walking onto a car parked on the grounds of Soham Village College. Huntley was present at one of the press conferences in which, listen to this right here, this is really sickening, right? Huntley was present at one of the press conferences in which the parents of Wells and Chapman pled for the safe return of their daughters. On this occasion, he offered his condolences to the father of Wells, stating, "Kevin, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was your daughter." How sick and twisted is that, y'all? Huntley's precise motivation for voluntarily informing police of his encountering the children outside his home is unknown. It is speculated he chose to do so out of concerns that eyewitnesses may have seen him engaging in conversation with the girls outside his home. Investigators will later determine Wells and Chapman have most likely been attacked and possibly murdered in the dining room of College case. Ian Huntley would admit at his trial he had set fire to both bodies using petrol, presumably in an attempt to destroy forensic evidence. Huntley later told investigators he had taped bent lighters around his feet before carrying the children's bodies from the vehicle to the irrigation ditch. Huntley would later inform investigators that he had waited for nightfall before opting to drive RAF Lake and Heath to dispose of the girls' bodies. He further elaborated that a deciding factor to dispose of the bodies in this particular location had been the RAF Lake and Heath, which is 2 miles from the home of his disabled grandmother, and that if eyewitnesses spotted his vehicle, he could falsely claim his purpose for being in the vicinity had been his decision to visit his grandmother. Carr's decision to corroborate Huntley's lies to investigators and media in the early stages of the police investigation briefly resulted in police discounting Huntley as a suspect before eyewitness accounts of Carr's whereabouts on August the 4th, and a search of mobile phones and telephone records proved the falsity to falsify her claims. Huntley had attempted to burn these clothes in the late evening of August the 4th. The accelerant he used had caused a blaze, which he believed might attract attention, causing him to quickly extinguish the fire. Investigators later discovered that a week before his arrest, Huntley had taken his car to an Eli garage to have the vehicle tires changed. He used a false identity, okay? He had paid a mechanic $10 to place a false registration number on the receipt for this purchase. At the hearing, Carr was informed by Principal Crown Prosecutor Marion Baston the charge carried a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. On hearing this, Carr slumped forward. Police concluded that about 60 underage girls had been abused by Huntley. You see that? Y'all see that number? 60. 28 of whom were interviewed in the investigation of the Soham murders. You cannot say the system did not fail all these kids. You cannot say that at all. Huntley refused to meet his daughter, who only learned of her parentage at age 14 after seeing a pixelated photograph of herself and her mother in connection with Huntley during a school crime project. Huntley had never been convicted of any of these criminal allegations. His burglary charge had remained on file. Howard Gilbert, the then head teacher of Soham Village College, having admitted the college's failure to check Huntley's references prior to offering him employment. Later said he would not have employed Huntley if he had been aware of the burglary charge, as one of the Huntley's key responsibilities was to ensure the security in the school grounds. Several of Carr's former partners were later informed reporters they found her to be emotionally detached, sexually promiscuous, and also jealous by nature. Here's where I get this saying about her other relationships, because I read this earlier. Several of her early relationships had ended for these reasons of being emotionally detached, sexually promiscuous, and also jealous. Huntley's parents had separated in 93. Following their separation, Huntley had distanced himself from his father for several years. Okay, this is where this is important. Huntley's mother's maiden name was Nixon. Following the separation of his parole in 93, Huntley chose to use his mother's surname. He would resume using his father's surname only following the 2002 reconciliation of his parents. See, I want to see if there's something on the Netflix. Maxine Carr gave Alabama to save me, not to deceive, please. Let me get on down here. Okay, let's see. There's even Girls Are the Best of Friends, Eden Standard. So go back down here trying to see. See, that's Beyond Evil. That's that book. Silence on Streets of Soham as jury retraces girls' final steps. Holly and Jessica timetable of The Guardian. And Hurley Now, What Happened to Soham Murder After He Killed Holly Wells. Mistake made by Maxine Carr. And it said by Maxine Carr that showed she knew Ian Huntley had killed some schoolgirls. That's what I showed y'all at the very beginning. Let's see. Huntley guilty of some murders. We did the biography. Look how much this is going on and on, but here about this story. The Guardian, there's a film release of missing girls. That's when they were walking along the street, that shows that where they stopped over there at the college. Walking is the last known footsteps of Holly and Jessica. So I'm going on and seeing if I do see. If y'all happen to see that on there, there's got to be a Netflix. I thought I'd seen that before. And maybe I'm missing it right now, but I'm trying to see if I see a Netflix movie here. See how this goes on and on? Other different stories, but this is where they got a lot of their information from, and they put it in there, letting the people know. Okay. So that fake alibis, ownership of Red Fiesta is key issue in Soham trial. So y'all look at Netflix and see if y'all see anything on Ian Huntley, or do a Google search and see if y'all see. Okay, there's Soham accused card to testify by a prison video link. Okay. It still ain't the same thing. Okay, so if y'all find out anything, please let me know. Jackie, if you see it, please let me know also later on because I want to end up watching it because this has really got me interested in the full story, even though it pretty well covered a lot of this here. See how it goes on and on. But this is a lot of that book says references the same book, But it's Court number one, the Old Bailey trials that define modern Britain. I think that's pretty interesting. And I think I did before on that other case, the Rose. Do you remember me doing that, Jackie? What's that? Did she want Jessica die? Okay. She wasn't there, remember? Because, oh boy. There we go. Concerns about teachers list 99. Yeah, we need to make sure we do that. Keep a watch on all that kind of stuff. Well, there's got a lot of different stuff in here, ain't it? It's very sick and twisted. Did you know the brunt of this, Jackie? It's really horrible, ain't it? Yeah, Rose West and Fred West. I think I done their story prior, but I might need to go back in there and do it again because they said some information is now okay to get out there. So I might need to redo that. Yeah, it is so sad. It's horrendous. Well, thank Jackie Glenn right here for bringing this case to our awareness. And this is just a horrendous story. And look how many kids do not get justice. Get all that. I feel sorry for that girl that found out that this was her daddy, this monster. It's horrendous. But thank y'all so much. And I say God bless y'all. Be a voice for the voiceless. You remember it too well? Well, I hope I did this justice, Jackie, and I appreciate you so much. God bless each one.